Hi, I'm Nick Hopwood. I'm from the University of Technology, Sydney, and this is a video with a linked blog about anxiety. Particularly, I'm thinking about anxiety in academic work, and especially among research students, those doing a PhD, another kind of doctorate, or a master's by research. I'll come clean and say I hadn't been planning on doing a video or a blog post about anxiety, but I was really prompted to today. I get contacted by students from lots of different universities, lots of different parts of the world, and one of them today really made me think twice and made me pause and think about what the most important thing I could do today would be. And this person said this: "It's a learning process, right? I'm still figuring out what works for me. Like walking for a long time is really good. But just recognizing that this anxiety is a problem, like a broken finger for example, and that it needs some time, maybe medicine, to heal, has been a big step for me. And I know it goes away. Just being able to put a name on it has helped me a lot. And what also helps is to talk to people who experience such things and realize that it's so normal. For me, I'm having the ups and downs, and I've had some therapy. But now I somewhat accept that this is part of me, and that's why I want to make it normal for people to talk about." And I thought, wow, yeah, this is really important. And this person had been saying to me that she was aware that lots of people around her were experiencing anxiety, and that she looked at some of the literature about anxiety among PhD students and found there to be quite a considerable prevalence of these kinds of difficulties. And it made me realise that anxiety in academic work, whether you're a student or an academic, is really common, but often hidden and often invisible. Now, I'm going to come clean and say I'm not an expert in mental health or well-being. I don't particularly know what exactly the definition of anxiety is. I'm particularly aware that the boundary between stress and anxiety and something like depression, for me, are really ambiguous. I don't know where one starts or stops. And some of you might listen to what I have to say and think, well, Nick is talking about stress. And it may be, and I think stress is part of the kinds of anxiety that I feel. So a big thing is, if you do think you're affected by some of the things that this student mentioned or that I'm going to talk about, please do go to somebody who really does know what they're talking about in terms of how to address and recognise these things. I will point to a really nice paper by Gina Whisker and Gillian Robinson. There'll be a link to it in my blog. The title is called "In Sickness and in Health and a Duty of Care, PhD Student Health, Stress and Wellbeing Issues and Supervisory Experiences." And what I like about this is that it's suggesting that health and well-being are at the centre of what we should be thinking about when we're supervising research students, and that it's not something that supervisors can just kind of dismiss and say, oh yeah, but that's for other people to deal with. And linked to that, I have to remind myself sometimes, and I think it's important to remind ourselves as a community, that when we're supervising research students, we're not supervising a brain, nor are we just actually supervising a person. We're supervising a person with people that depend on them. That might be children or parents or other people they care for. People that they depend on, that things might happen to. Husbands might get sick, children or parents might get sick or worse. With demands of other work and jobs. Community commitments that are really important but often very demanding of them, as well as basic things like housing needs and their own bodies to look after. Sleep properly, eat properly, do whatever exercise is important to them. So that's a context under which we might understand and think about anxiety in academic work. The academics or students becoming academics or doing research are not just brains who use their bodies to carry their brain from one room or conference to another. They're actually whole people and people in context. So what am I going to talk about in this blog? Well, that student who emailed me this morning made me think there might be some value just in talking about the anxiety that I've had. That's it. It's a really simple idea behind this video post and the blog that's linked to it. I'm just going to share the story of my anxiety. That's it. In fact, this story isn't about the anxiety in my PhD, but about the anxiety that's happened to me after that. And there's been quite a bit of it. So I finished my PhD, and then I took on a research officer job in the same city where I'd been doing my PhD research. And things were going well, and it was a real wake-up call for me when my boss took me aside, and she was an amazing person, and I've written in another blog post about kind of how I think I benefited from the sorts of mentoring and supervision and management she gave me. She took me aside and said, "Nick, you seem a bit distracted and almost harassed at the moment. You kind of, the way you're responding to things I'm asking, it doesn't seem like you." And the thing that really hit me like poof was that she said, "I don't think your work's been as good as it usually is in the past few weeks." And I was like, oh, whoa. And all of a sudden it hit home. I was like, something is going on. This isn't taking care of itself. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, I'm not falling asleep at night. My brain was going, and it wasn't kind of like an energetic, I was anxious about stuff. And there were a lot of things piling up, things that I cared about, things that might be high stakes, lots of uncertainties in my life at the time around various different things, including what might happen when this particular fixed term job finished and I had been rejected from a couple of academic jobs I'd applied for and things like that. I would be waking up in the middle of the night absolutely drenched in sweat and like having horrible dreams and just unable to switch my brain off, and particularly to switch it off from these really unhelpful and unpleasant thoughts. And so my boss, being the amazing person that she was, Lynn McAlpine, talked to me about a couple of things that she'd found helpful in managing her own anxiety. And the first thing was, she actually mentioned that she'd had anxiety too. And I didn't kind of realise what a big deal that was at the time, but it meant that we were talking about this on an equal footing as human beings to whom anxiety sometimes happens. It's just part of who we are. One thing she suggested to me was that I could sit down and think about like being in a hot air balloon, in a basket underneath a hot air balloon, and in this basket, keeping it on the ground, would be lots of different like sandbags or heavy things. And the idea was that I could associate each sandbag or heavy thing with something I was anxious about or that was troubling me. And in my mind, I would lift them up and then kind of drop them out of this balloon. So, you know, here you go, here's your job uncertainty. You kind of lift it up and drop. And here are things you're worried about, this big report you've got to write. You lift it up and drop. And that made a lot of sense to me. I thought, yeah, I can imagine this is kind of, as you let these things go, and she said, and in your mind, the kind of, you know, the basket gets a bit lighter, and you kind of eventually lift. And I really did give this a go. I thought, wow, why not? I've got nothing to lose, right? It's not going to cost me anything. It completely didn't work for me. I was sort of person, I don't know what it was, I didn't have the mental discipline. As soon as I thought about what all the heavy things were in the balloon, that made me even more anxious. I was like, oh my God, look at all these things. Or I think about one and I just dive into the anxiety. I couldn't get to the point of really thinking about it and letting it go. So the kind of trying to figure it out in my head didn't work. And then I tried the opposite thing. I thought, oh, maybe if I just had some like really nice long soaks and a warm bath, and I got candles out and I got some nice scents and put classical music on, which is something I often find kind of very relaxing and I have very positive associations with. And nah, again, I would come out of the bath exactly as anxious as I was before. But things have now got better. And until recently, it was a very long time since I'd kind of had these anxious experiences. So what have I learned? Well, this is only things I've learned about things that help me with my anxiety. And the first thing about helping myself with my anxiety is to notice it. To know what the early warning signs are so that I can pick it up and kind of address it before it gets into this entrenched and quite serious state. So me, the early warning signs are not being able to fall asleep, or not being able to fall back to sleep if I wake up in the night. I also have things like I get unusually worried about my partner being on a bicycle, and I get very anxious to hear from them during the day and check they're okay, and kind of worry if I'm at home, is something going to happen? Are they going to get in an accident? So kind of things that normally every day I'm quite comfortable with. I realise if I start dwelling on these things, that's an early warning sign for me that other stuff is going on that maybe I haven't acknowledged or recognised yet. I also realise that I become kind of hypersensitive to otherwise copable with stresses at work. Work is full of stress. Academic work is absolutely replete with things that do stress you mentally and physically. And normally that's okay. I kind of respond all right. And then I kind of realise, oh mate, why is that? Why are you making such a big deal of that in your head? Or why are you kind of picking something up and really sitting on it? And, also, I now have really good colleagues. I'm not with the same person, Lynn, as I was before, but colleagues around me know me, and we know we can have these kinds of conversations. And I've had a couple of people just sit me down, take me down for coffee and say, Nick, look, it seems like you're getting really overwhelmed by this thing. So I think, all right. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm just super stressed. I know it's all going to finish in 2 weeks. They've got all these deadlines. There's 101 things they need to be doing. But whatever happens in 2 weeks, they're going to be over and I'm going to be okay. But they're spotting it for me as well. And investing in that relationship where you can have those conversations with colleagues is part of me being able to pick up on my early warning signs because other people can do it for me or with me. Now, what about what works when I get anxious? Well, I found that I just don't have the ability to kind of meditate my way through anxiety or out of it. I'd love to do those things like the hot air balloon idea or other kind of really sitting and being still. For me, I just get more and more into my anxiety when I try and do that. And just floating around in the bath wasn't enough either. I think for me what works is things that occupy both my body physically and my brain. And there are a few things that I know really do that well. One of them is playing music, and you can see I've got the viola case down there. When I'm playing music, I've joined local orchestras, or even just when I practice at home, there's no space left in my mind to be anxious. I'm fully physically occupied, fully mentally occupied in what notes I'm playing. The same if I sit and play the piano. I put my headphones on, play some pieces I really like. That completely occupies me and helps me, however briefly, tap out of that anxiety. And I think that's giving my body a way of just kind of saying, you don't have to feel like this. There are moments you can take out, and sometimes the tail of those moments is quite short and I get anxious again quite quickly. Sometimes it actually has quite an enduring effect and I feel better about things for quite a while after I stop the immersive activity. Other things that I've found that work for me are things like swimming. Or freediving particularly, because that's swimming kind of up and down laps in the pool. Yeah, your brain can kind of take over on things, but it does kind of soften my anxiety. But particularly like freediving, where you really have to focus physically and mentally, I find I come out for 2 hours in the water and I'd forgotten about all the things that are making me anxious. Yoga is another thing. I think it has that combination of physical movement, physical focus and occupation, as well as the kind of the mental gaze and kind of thinking inwards. So I've learned for me that when I get anxious, it's those kinds of things which really help me kind of get back in tune with a balanced view about what's worth my emotional investment and what's not, as well as an acceptance that sometimes I will just have to sit through this anxiety until the things making me anxious have passed. And that's what this student mentioned earlier. It's kind of like, this is just part of me, and anxiety sometimes happens. You can't always, at least I can't, always make it go away, but I can accept that it will go away. Other things I've done to help with my particular anxiety in academia is put my rejection wall up on my office. Like, I used to send myself this message all the time. Oh yeah, sometimes Nick, you're great, you've got all these publications. But it was also meant that, if the next one gets rejected, oh no, what's going to happen? Or what if this research grant gets rejected? By putting them all up there on my office wall, and there's a blog post and a tweet and a whole bunch of things about this rejection wall, it's a kind of way of owning the expectation of rejection and just kind of preempting it and buffering against the anxiety that I might get. I'm just about to submit a huge research grant with some colleagues from Tasmania. Very unlikely that we'll get the money. I think it's a great grant, but that's the way these competitions go for these applications for research. Am I anxious about not getting it? Not at all. Will it be really frustrating? Absolutely. Will I be absolutely gutted? Completely, if we don't get the money. But I'm not anxious about it. And I think part of that is because I'm now just putting all my rejections up on the wall, reminding myself that they happen. I'm still here, still in a job. And I know that comes from a point of security and quite a lot of privilege in terms of having a permanent academic job where being rejected from a research grant, you know, this year, but next year, whatever, isn't kind of like a sword of Damocles hanging over my head that means I'm going to lose my job. If you're in a contract situation, which was what I was when I was first kind of made to confront the fact that I was experiencing quite a lot of anxiety, it is a very different thing. And so I'm not suggesting it's good for everybody to share their rejections, but for me, it's one thing that's helped. And what I have realised is that I'm not immune from anxiety building up, despite having learned these things that I know work for me, at least for now. Doesn't mean that anxiety doesn't happen anymore. I can't kind of magic it away. There were a few months last year in 2018 where I had a really horrible combination of stress and anxiety. And I employed some of these techniques and it kind of wasn't going away. It wasn't one of those things where I could see the end in 2 weeks' time. It looked like it was quite an open-ended or ongoing set of causes or triggers. And so I did actually take it to my doctor, which was the first time I'd ever done that. I recognised that it was happening because I'm better at recognising the kind of the symptoms and the signs of it now. And I mentioned it to my doctor, and the doctor said, "Yeah, I think you need to work on this. That's not okay. What you're describing in terms of the sleep patterns and other kind of me becoming anxious about very routine daily things as well as the big kind of work related things." And me being me, I didn't kind of immediately go and seek help from a counsellor and things like that, and I knew I had some time away from work coming up, and that gave me some distance. And coming back now, some of the same things are there, but I have a bit of a different response to them. So that's a bit of the story of my anxiety. I don't know if it's going to be any help to anyone. I hope that just the idea of normalising it and saying, yes, it happens. Anxiety, I've experienced anxiety. What works for me may or may not work for other people. And I'd just like to go back to what this student sent to me earlier, because I think it really will help tie up and resonate with some of the things that I've mentioned in this video. It's a learning process, right? Yeah, absolutely. It took me ages to figure out what works for me, but where I figured those out was through conversations I had with people about anxiety, being open about it, and those people also being open and frank with me and said, well, have you tried this? This worked for me. Maybe you try this. She said, I'm still figuring out what works for me, like walking a long time is really good. That would be hopeless for me. I've been on lots of long walks to try and do it, and it wasn't kind of immersive and occupying enough for me. Recognizing that anxiety is a problem, like a broken finger. And I love that there, like a broken finger. I hate distinguishing between physical and mental health. I think they're so tied together. Certainly when I get anxious, it affects, it's a physical experience as much as a mental one. And I don't see any more stigma attached with being anxious than I would with if I'd fallen off my bike and broken my finger and I'd walk into work with a big plaster on. But it's hard. And anxiety does need time, as she said, maybe medicine to heal. That's a big step. And it does go away, she said, and I know it goes away. Naming it helps a lot, and talking about it with people who experience such things. I now somewhat accept that this is part of me, and I do the same. I'm one of those people who has experienced anxiety. I get anxious about things sometimes. It's not the front that everybody sees, but a lot of people who know me will know that I have periods where my stress and anxiety response to things isn't the same as it normally is. So if this video is any use at all, I'd be really pleased. Please feel free to comment or add things or maybe share some experiences. If you want to email me privately and so I can add a comment kind of anonymously so it's not even associated with your web handle or social media identity, that's absolutely fine. And I really just want to say thank you to that student who emailed me today. You made me think really seriously about what's an important and overlooked issue. All right, bye-bye.